On June 25, 2014, Andrew Wiggins was selected first overall in the NBA draft. His father had been selected 23rd in 1983. Same last name, same sport. 27 years apart. Before this video ends, you will learn what happened in between. You will learn about the 1986 NBA Finals, the father on the floor, the Rockets against Bird's Celtics, the run that was supposed to be the beginning of something. You will learn what the NBA found in January of 1987, and what they did with it. You will learn what he said when the denial was over. Mistakes are made in life, and I made a mistake. Mitchell has to get Mitchell out of this. And you will learn whether he did. Because the comeback season, the season after 2 years away, was the best season of his career. 15 points per game. After the worst thing that happened to him. His son won a championship. His father became a warning. He was more than a warning. On June 25, 2014, the Cleveland Cavaliers selected Andrew Wiggins with the first overall pick in the NBA draft. He was 19 years old. He had played 1 season of college basketball at Kansas. He was 6'7", athletic, fluid, a player whose combination of physical tools and competitive instincts had made him the consensus top prospect in a class that the league had been tracking since his junior year of high school. He was also the son of Mitchell Wiggins, the shooting guard who had been selected 23rd overall in the 1983 NBA draft, who had played 4 seasons for the Houston Rockets, including a trip to the 1986 NBA Finals, and who had been banned from the league in January of 1987 after failing a cocaine test. 27 years, from the ban to the first overall pick, from the father's lowest moment to the son's highest. The same last name on 2 very different draft cards, separated by a generation and a decision that the father made in the winter of 1987, and that the sport documented with the permanence that it reserves for failures. Mitchell Wiggins is not primarily remembered as an NBA player. He is primarily remembered as Andrew Wiggins' father, which is, in the accounting of the sport, both accurate and deeply unfair. He played 389 regular season games. He averaged 10.0 points per game across his career. He was on the floor for the Houston Rockets' run to the 1986 NBA Finals. He averaged 15.0 points per game in his comeback season of 1989-90, the finest individual season of his career, produced after 2 years away from the league, proving that what the ban had interrupted was still present. He was not only the father of the first overall pick, he was a player, he was a person. He made a mistake and said so directly. Mistakes are made in life, and I made a mistake. Now I've got to correct it. I have only myself to blame. Mitchell has to get Mitchell out of this. He got Mitchell out of it. He came back. He played. He had his best season after the worst thing that had happened to him. He died on September 9, 2024, at 64 years old. This documentary is about the career that existed before the ban, the years that the ban took, the comeback that the ban could not prevent, and the son who wore the same name into a draft that remembered the father for the wrong thing. Mitchell Lee Wiggins was born on September 28, 1959, in Kinston, North Carolina, a small city in Lenoir County in the eastern part of the state, tobacco and textile country, a community that has produced, across the decades, a disproportionate number of professional basketball players relative to its size. He attended North Lenoir High School in LaGrange, North Carolina. He was a shooting guard, 6'4", quick, a scorer with the ability to create his own shot and to find the spaces in a defense that a player with his quickness could exploit. He was good enough to draw college interest and to navigate the specific pathway that players from small North Carolina towns navigate toward the programs that can develop them for the professional level. His college career took a circuitous route. He attended Truett McConnell Community College in Georgia for 1 year, then transferred to Clemson for his sophomore year, then transferred again to Florida State, where he spent his final 2 college seasons. The transfers, while common enough in the college basketball landscape, reflected the specific instability of a player still finding the right environment, still developing the consistency that professional scouts look for in the players they project to the next level. At Florida State, he found the environment. He averaged 23.8 points per game as a junior in 1981-82, leading the Metro Conference in scoring. He averaged 22.7 points per game as a senior in 1982-83, earning honorable mention All-American recognition. The production was real and consistent, not the numbers of a player who had one good season against soft competition, but 2 consecutive seasons of sustained scoring in a legitimate conference against legitimate defenders. The Indiana Pacers selected him 23rd overall in the 1983 NBA Draft, a class that included Clyde Drexler, Byron Scott, and Doc Rivers, players whose careers would define the decade. Wiggins was selected in the same round as those players, in the range of picks that defines the boundary between the players teams invest in and the players teams hope will develop. The Pacers traded his rights to the Chicago Bulls on draft night. He never played a game for Indiana. He arrived in Chicago as a Bulls player, a role player on a team that was, in 1983, in the process of accumulating the pieces that would eventually, with the addition of Michael Jordan in the following year's draft, become something historic. He was not going to be part of that historic thing. He was traded to Houston after one season. The Houston Rockets of the mid-1980s were a genuine contender, built around Hakeem Olajuwon, the center from Lagos, Nigeria, who would become one of the 5 greatest players in the history of the position, and Ralph Sampson, the 7'4" center from Virginia, whose combination of size and skill had made him the first overall pick in the 1983 draft. The Twin Towers, Olajuwon and Sampson, gave the Rockets a front court that no other team in the Western Conference could match. Mitchell Wiggins arrived as a guard, a role player in the specific sense that the term has in the NBA, a player whose function is to contribute within a defined scope rather than to define the team's identity. He averaged 10.3 points per game in 21 minutes per night, coming off the bench, providing the scoring and defensive energy that backup guards provide to contending teams. In 1986, the Rockets reached the NBA Finals. They defeated the Sacramento Kings and the Dallas Mavericks and the Los Angeles Lakers in the Western Conference playoffs. 3 series, increasingly difficult competition, Olajuwon and Sampson carrying the front court load, while the guards provided the supporting contributions that championship runs require. The finals opponent was the Boston Celtics, the team of Bird and Parrish and McHale, the team that had won the championship 2 years earlier and was, in 1986, in the middle of what most observers consider the finest single season in franchise history. The Celtics went 67-15 in the regular season. They were the defending champions. They were the consensus best team in the league. The Rockets lost in 6 games. This was not a failure in any meaningful sense. Losing to the 1986 Boston Celtics in the finals was, for any team that got there, an acknowledgement of what they had accomplished, rather than a verdict on what they had failed to do. Wiggins had been on the floor for the run. He had contributed what his role required. He had been part of a finals team at 26 years old, the specific achievement that defines a significant minority of professional basketball careers, and that the majority of players who spend years in the league never reach. The following season should have been the foundation for something larger. The Twin Towers were intact. The supporting cast was intact. The franchise had the structure of a perennial contender. Then, in January of 1987, everything stopped. On January 15, 1987, NBA Commissioner David Stern announced that Mitchell Wiggins and his teammate Lewis Lloyd had been suspended from the league after testing positive for cocaine use. The suspension was issued under the terms of the 1983 drug testing agreement between the NBA and the Players Association, the policy that had been put in place in the aftermath of the cocaine epidemic that had consumed the league in the early 1980s. The policy whose most visible applications had been the bans of Michael Ray Richardson and Roy Tarpley, and the deaths that the epidemic had produced. The specific terms of the ban were significant. Under the 1983 agreement, players who tested positive and elected not to voluntarily enter a treatment program were subject to a 2-year suspension. Players who voluntarily entered treatment could receive a lesser penalty. Wiggins and Lloyd had not volunteered for treatment before the positive test. The 2-year ban was the consequence. Wiggins's response, once the denial period had passed, was direct. Mistakes are made in life, and I made a mistake. Now I've got to correct it. I have only myself to blame. Mitchell has to get Mitchell out of this. You could count on one hand the number of times I've done drugs in the last 7 months, but I never understood the seriousness of it. That's something you learn in treatment. These are not the statements of a man who was cavalier about what had happened. They are the statements of a man who had done something he should not have done, who had not understood the framework within which it was being evaluated, and who was now confronting the consequences with the specific combination of accountability and confusion that the drug policies of the era produced. The 1983 policy was designed to deter drug use through punishment rather than to address it through treatment. The player who used drugs was not offered rehabilitation as the primary response. He was offered a ban, with treatment as the alternative to a longer ban. The policy treated drug use as a disciplinary matter rather than a medical one. Wiggins was 27 years old. He had reached the NBA Finals. He had a career in front of him. The ban removed 2 years of that career and returned him at 29 to try to rebuild what the suspension had interrupted. The 2 years of Mitchell Wiggins's suspension produced what 2 years of NBA suspension in the mid-1980s produced: a period of professional basketball outside the primary circuit, in the leagues and circuits that existed below the NBA level, in the specific geography of American minor league basketball that has always served as both a development environment and a waiting room. He played for the Tampa Bay Stars of the USBL. He played for the Mississippi Jets. He played for the Quad City Thunder and the Jacksonville Hooters, the teams whose names reflect the specific economy of minor league basketball in mid-sized American cities in the late 1980s. He also encountered John Lucas. Lucas, whose own story this channel has told, the former first overall pick who had lost his career to cocaine and rebuilt it through rehabilitation, was operating his recovery program during this period. The same program that had helped Richard Dumas and Roy Tarpley and other players navigating the specific intersection of basketball ability and substance dependency. The connection between Lucas and Wiggins was part of the broader ecosystem of recovery that existed within and around professional basketball in the late 1980s. The informal network of former players and coaches and program operators who understood what the formal institutional response of the ban had not addressed, and who were building the alternative that the policy did not provide. Wiggins did the work. He stayed ready. He maintained his game at whatever level the minor circuits allowed. He prepared for the return that the policy would eventually permit. In July of 1989, he was reinstated to the NBA. He was 29 years old. He had lost 2 years. He came back to Houston. Mitchell Wiggins's comeback season of 1989 to 90 produced the finest individual numbers of his NBA career. He averaged 15.0 points per game across 66 games for the Houston Rockets. He shot 49.5% from the field. He played 28.1 minutes per night, significantly more than the 21 minutes he had averaged before the suspension. 15 points per game, after 2 years away from the league, after the minor circuits and the recovery work and the specific discipline of maintaining a professional level of play without the structure of a professional environment. After the ban and the public accounting and the loss of 2 years of his prime. 15 points per game. This number requires emphasis because it is the number the story most needs. The narrative around Mitchell Wiggins, the narrative that defines him primarily as the father of Andrew Wiggins, and secondarily as a player who was banned for cocaine, does not typically include the fact that his comeback season was his best season. The comeback produced better basketball than the ban had interrupted. This is not a common outcome. Players who miss 2 years of professional competition at the age of 27 and return at 29 typically produce diminished versions of what they had been. The physical decline, the competitive rust, the psychological weight of the return, these factors typically produce a player who is recognizably the same person, but operating at a reduced level. Wiggins returned and had the best season of his career. The Rockets, despite the comeback season, did not extend a long-term commitment. He played one season back in Houston. The following year, he went unsigned. The Philadelphia 76ers eventually signed him for 49 games, the final NBA season of his career. After Philadelphia, he played overseas, Italy, Greece, the Philippines. He continued playing basketball until 2003, 20 years after he had been drafted. He was 43 years old when his professional career finally ended. When Andrew Wiggins was selected first overall in the 2014 NBA draft, the coverage of the selection routinely included a reference to his father. Mitchell Wiggins, the shooting guard who had played for the Houston Rockets, who had been suspended for cocaine in 1987. The son of the banned player, becoming the first overall pick. The framing was not malicious. It was the kind of framing that sports coverage applies to generational connections, the story of what the father did and what the son became, the arc from one generation to the next. But the framing consistently placed the ban first. Mitchell Wiggins was identified primarily through the suspension, through the thing that had happened in January of 1987, rather than through the finals appearance that had preceded it or the comeback season that had followed it. Andrew Wiggins went on to have the career that the first overall pick projects to. Not uniformly, not without difficulty, but ultimately, 9 NBA seasons, a championship with the Golden State Warriors in 2022, All-Star selection in 2022. The arc of a legitimate NBA career sustained across the decade that followed his draft. Mitchell Wiggins, who had reached the finals himself, who had come back from the ban to average 15 points per game, who had played professional basketball until he was 43 years old, Mitchell Wiggins spent the years after his career as primarily Andrew Wiggins' father. This is not a complaint. It is an observation about what the sport remembers and how it remembers it. The first overall pick eclipses the role player in the coverage, as it should. The son's championship eclipses the father's finals appearance, as it should. What gets lost in the eclipse is the specific shape of Mitchell Wiggins' own story. The Kinston beginning, the circuitous college career, the finals, the ban, the comeback season that was better than anything before it, the 20 years of professional basketball in whatever league would have him. He was a player. He was a father. He made a mistake and said so. He came back and had his best season. He died on September 9th, 2024. He was 64 years old. The Houston Rockets released a statement. His son Andrew had won a championship 2 years earlier. The 1983 NBA drug agreement, the policy that banned Mitchell Wiggins and Lewis Lloyd and Michael Ray Richardson and Roy Tarpley and others, was designed around a specific philosophy. Drug use by professional athletes was a disciplinary problem, and disciplinary problems were addressed through punishment. The philosophy was not irrational in 1983. The cocaine epidemic that had consumed the league in the late 1970s and early 1980s had produced deaths and scandals, and a genuine crisis of public confidence in the integrity of professional basketball. The Commissioner's office needed a visible, enforceable response. The ban was visible. The ban was enforceable. The ban demonstrated that the league was serious. What the ban did not demonstrate was that the league was effective. Punishment alone does not address dependency. The player who is banned for cocaine use and told that he may return after 2 years has been removed from the league but has not been treated. The conditions that produce the use, the specific combination of money, availability, social pressure, and the absence of support structures that the professional basketball environment of the 1980s produced, those conditions have not changed. Only the player's access to the league has changed. Wiggins came back because he did the work himself. He sought the recovery. He used whatever resources were available, John Lucas's program, the minor league structure, his own discipline, to prepare for the return. The league's policy had not provided those resources. The policy had provided the ban. Wiggins had provided the rest. The NBA that exists today has built the infrastructure that the 1983 policy did not include. treatment-first approaches, confidential support programs, mental health professionals on staff. The policy has evolved across the decades between Wiggins's ban and the present. The evolution came too late for him. He lost 2 years at 27. He came back at 29 and had his best season, evidence that the infrastructure would have been useful, that the player who was capable of 15 points per game in his comeback had that capability available before the ban, and might have maintained it through an intervention that treated the dependency rather than punishing it. He was not the system's victim in the way that the innocent are victims. He used cocaine. The policy responded. These are both true. They are also both insufficient as the complete accounting. Mitchell Wiggins wore the number 15 for the Houston Rockets. His son Andrew wore the number 22 for the Golden State Warriors. 2 different numbers, 2 different franchises, 2 different eras, 1 last name. The last name carries both of them. The father's finals appearance and the father's ban. The son's first overall selection and the son's championship. The accounting of what the Wiggins family has produced in professional basketball is, taken in full, the accounting of 2 careers across 2 generations, one of which was interrupted by a policy that treated dependency as a disciplinary problem, and one of which benefited from the infrastructure the sport built in response to everything the earlier era produced. Mitchell Wiggins made a mistake. He said so. He corrected it on his own terms, with the resources available to him, in the minor leagues and the recovery programs, and the discipline of a man who understood that Mitchell had to get Mitchell out of this. Mitchell got Mitchell out of it. He came back. He averaged 15 points. He played 20 years of professional basketball. He watched his son become the first overall pick and a champion. He died at 64. The sport remembered him primarily for January of 1987. He had been more than January of 1987. He had been Kinston and Florida State, and the finals, and the ban, and the minor leagues, and John Lucas, and the comeback, and 15 points per game, and Italy and Greece and the Philippines, and the father watching from wherever fathers watch when their sons are drafted first overall. The system called him a warning. He called it a mistake he corrected. He was right about that too. His son won a ring.